our thoughts and doubts and experiences with this transdisciplinary experience that we are carrying out over the long term. It's called Alpages Sentinelles, and I will talk about this program and how we try to implement inter and transdisciplinarity in practice in relation to this topic of adaptation to climate change in mountain pastures. So this talk will bring you to a journey to mountain summer pastures with hopefully lovely photos that you can relate to in this nice landscape. I will be talking about pastoralism. Pastoralism is a type of extensive livestock farming where the domestic animals are led to graze outdoors in rangelands and pastures. And this very specific area that I will be talking about is this place up in the mountains where the herds are going during the summertime to graze. So we're not talking about the grasslands that are mown, but mostly those places up there. And mountain pastures happen to be at the crossroads of multiple challenges. They hold a productive dimension. There are key areas for many farms of the southern, of the French Alps, let's say. And there are places where meat and cheese are produced in many systems. But in addition to this productive dimension, they also hold an environmental dimension. They're very rich in terms of biodiversity, hosting many iconic species, being part of several protected areas. And of course, they also hold other dimensions, such as cultural dimensions. They are important for landscape aesthetics. They are used by a diversity of people, of stakeholders, of users, such as hikers, mountain bikers, and so on and so forth. So mountain pastures are this composite item with all those different dimensions. And in addition, as holds true globally, they have to face climate change. Pastoral systems have always been adapted to a range of climatic conditions, and they have always been able to withstand variability in terms of climate. And what happens now with climate change is this shift that we witnessed regarding baseline conditions. Temperatures are rising, basically. And also, we're witnessing an increased variability. There are more extreme events occurring, such as droughts, for instance. And the challenges that pastoral systems now have to face are summarized in those two questions as how do systems adapt when conditions change rapidly? And how can we, and who is we, contribute to supporting the adaptation? The initiative I will talk about is trying to tackle those questions. So I will briefly introduce the Alpages Sentinelles initiative or program so that you get an idea of the program that we are developing. In this program, this program was designed to address uncertainties linked to how mountain pastures and related pastoral systems could evolve in the face of climate change. And since 2007, it's a network of partners that is working together at the scale of the French Alps. And they're working on a new object, on this new boundary object that we have, which is the mountain pasture in the context of climate change. And we have two main questions that help us working on this topic. The first one relates to the impacts of climate change on vegetation, resources, and pastoral management. And the second one relates to the tools that we can create or design to help local stakeholders in thinking about how to adapt to climate change. To work on those two questions, we are a network of partners, and here you have an idea of the diversity of partners that are involved in Alpages Sentinelles. The coordination of the program is done in my lab, l'ESSEM, and I was hired in 2018 to be part of the coordination. We're two entering this role. I'm more from the scientific background, and my colleague is more from the technical background, so you have this complementarity of backgrounds. Then there are people from protected areas, national parks and regional parks mostly. Partners with a more technical background from pastoral support services, which are the structures in charge of advising farmers and supporting them. Then different scientists from different disciplines, from different labs, many from my lab, but also from others. And partners from agricultural education. And of course, we have this diversity of political and financial partners, which are really essential to the long-term process of Alpages Sentinelles. Here you get an idea of the spatial extent of the network, covering the whole Alps, and all the red dots are the mountain pastures where we have our field monitoring in place. And here you get an idea of the spatial, the temporal span throughout which Alpages Sentinelles evolved. So starting in 2007 with National Park of the Écrin, and slowly broadening up and integrating more partners, more territory, and more different types of stakeholders, let's say. So to describe Alpages Sentinelles, we usually use this structure along 3 pillars. Alpages Sentinelles is an observatory, so I already mentioned that we're using these 30 mountain pastures as pilot sites, and there we're monitoring vegetation and pastoral practices, and then we have this huge database in the lab to collect data and then analyze it. Then we are co-producing tools and methods using both scientific, technical, and methodological dimensions, and you get an idea of the diversity of things that we're trying to create. They can be leaflets, technical guidelines, web interfaces, videos, and so on, so as to reach a broader audience, let's say. And then we're trying to maintain this space of dialogue so that partners could exchange knowledge and feel this dynamics and this network dynamics, either at the scale of the French Alps or more locally in each of the protected area territory. So what we try to do is to be supporting this exchange of perspective and expertise, and weaving together different types of knowledge from scientific, technical, and experiential domains. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is to promote the emergence of a shared culture and to provide everyone with the necessary tools for reflection. So we're not there to provide people with specific management recommendation, but more to equip them with the tools that allow them to make choices and make decisions by themselves. And from this very short description of the program, my point was to show that Alpages Sentinelles can be a basis for reflection on how we work practically with inter and transdisciplinarity, because it's a kind of composite object which is at the same time a question about this boundary object, mountain pastures in the context of climate change. It's a bunch of stakeholders, sets of partners that is evolving through time, and it's also an action program with very concrete things that we do together in the field, in working group, in discussions, also depending on the expectation and requests from our partners. So what I'd like to do in the second part of this talk is to show you some of the insights and doubts and questions that we have in relation to inter and transdisciplinarity in this program. And we'll start with interdisciplinarity and some of the open questions that we have. Mountain pastures can be considered social ecological systems, and here you get a very crude description of this type of social ecological system. You can see some of its environmental dimension with climate, vegetation, landscape dynamics, and so on. And you also get some of its social dimension with the different types of people that use or value or manage these pastures. And in the middle, you have some of the concepts that can be used to articulate environmental and social dimensions, such as resources, agroecological properties, or ecosystem services, among others. What I find interesting with this entry point or with this description is that you can see the different ways through which scientists in our teams or in our network can enter and assess and study this object. So what they're doing is that they're picking up one of these dimensions, trying to investigate it further, and step by step producing a more complete picture of the topic, of this object. For instance, here are some insights that we get from environmental sciences. So we have colleagues who are plant ecologists, and they're monitoring vegetation throughout time in order to understand how species composition evolve through time, or how biomass, so vegetation growth, is depending on the climate and weather conditions. And they've been doing that, surveying vegetation throughout decades. And this is useful for the network because it brings us very significant insights in terms of how sensitive our vegetation towards climate change. And it can also be translated in very practical, hands-on information. For instance, where you're conducting a diagnostic on climatic vulnerability on a given pasture. So that was for insights, an example of insights from environmental science. And if we turn to social sciences, they're also contributing to the network. And I picked up this paper from Marine Gabier, who was a PhD student a few years ago. And she worked on the emotions that people, professionals involved in this kind of network and in Alpages Sentinelles withstand while working on those programs. And she demonstrated that there are very contrasting emotions, such as hope to contribute to something, to improving the situation, to align their work and their values, for instance, but also other types of feelings, such as boredom, because of all the administrative burdens, all the time constraints, and all the heaviness that you have in relation to those programs. And for us, as a network, this is super valuable insights, because our objective is to maintain the network throughout time and to create this kind of community feeling. And so caring about these emotions also matter, and we first have to identify them. So very short examples of how disciplines can contribute to our understanding of this topic. Here are other types of disciplines that are contributing to the program. What I want to say is that we haven't started with this very holistic social ecological system thinking, but we're rather constructing this approach like step by step. So we're not there yet, we're not totally interdisciplinary yet, but we're trying to go in this direction, let's say. What's helpful for us is that we're using some integrative concepts, such as vulnerability, for instance, and also that we're working with non-academic partners, which are pushing us to reach this more holistic understanding of the system. In terms of questions, for sure, we still have this objective of reaching a kind of scientific recognition and to ensure a sufficient publication rate, and that can be challenging in this kind of setting. But I won't go too much into details about those challenges, because I want to now step out from the lab and engage with those non-academic stakeholders and talk about transdisciplinarity. And questions. So, practically speaking, what are we doing with those partners? Well, different types of events that are organized. In the pilot pastures, we're doing every year around with different types of partners that exchange their very concrete views on this specific pasture. Then we also have training sessions in the field usually, where we share our views and knowledge about more broader topics, such as the sensitivity of vegetation to climate change here. And we also gather indoors, mostly, to have those working groups trying to take a step back and think about what are the tools, methods, guidelines, and so on that we could offer, we could develop, and then share with the broader community. And then more, maybe some classical events such as network meeting, that's our general assembly every year or so, communication through written media, and our partners also organize those local meetings where they discuss with shepherds and herders. What I would like to propose now is to focus not only on the what we do, but also on the consequences this has on the whole program. And I have 4 dimensions that I would like to address. The first thing that changes was this transdisciplinary process, let's say, is that people are changing their own views on what matters, on the topic of concern they have, and they're tending to broadening it up. So these are the quite stereotypical entry points: protected area manager focusing on conservation, pastoral services focusing on resource, and academic research focusing on disciplinary entry points and papers. What happens with an initiative such as Alpages Sentinelles is that we're trying to reach this more systemic approach. And using this as a boundary object is making everybody actually finally change a bit their entry point and trying to reach this consensus about integrating all the perspective in their own concerns as well. And I guess this is partly what is interesting our funders, trying to bring people around the same table and talk about a common object instead of having those very different entry points. We're doing our best to integrate all those perspectives. Of course, we're missing some. We don't speak so much with shepherds, for instance, so they're not directly involved in the picture. We never talk with hikers and recreationists and so on. So this could be much more complete, but this is where we are now at the moment. A second thing that changes with transdisciplinarity is the type of working relationship between partners, because we talk about partners and not so much about service providers. People are there because they want to cooperate with each other, meaning that they are willing to dedicate time out of very operational situation that they have to handle every day, and also that they are willing to share their experiences, not only on their context, but also on a diversity of situation and challenges. And this is something that was not given from scratch, but that was built progressively. And one question that I have is how can we manage the evolution of local relationships? For instance, sometimes there is a conflict between two partners, which has nothing to do with Alpages Sentinelles, but nevertheless, how do you bring back those people around the table? And how do you ensure that they can still talk to each other in the context of the boundaries that we set around our events and that enable or allows the co-creation of knowledge and outputs? Third dimension is this wish or objective to get towards a shared responsibility among partners. And this first relates to the outputs that we're creating. I already mentioned it, and it was mentioned also before. That takes a long time because at least people need to understand what the others are talking about. So there is this common language thing that we already discussed. But maybe also something important here is that people have to agree to consider important the work of others, not only their own topic, but the way other people works. And this is illustrated here. This is the ideal triptych of outputs that we're trying to obtain with academic, technical, and popularized outputs. We are on the way to complete our toolbox, let's say, with this kind of triptych. It's not perfect yet, but we are working on this in this direction. And for us, the next step in this idea will be to work on better ensuring that production can be appropriated and disseminated more widely. So this is the next step for Alpages Sentinelles. And in terms of responsibility, we also want to talk about the themes, the topics that are addressed by the network and the methods that we use. And so what we're doing is to ask our partners what are the areas of work they want to be developed, and they also reach out directly to us when they have some requests. And now we were not so satisfied with the process that was in place, so we're trying this new steering committee system and trying to see whether or not it allows for this feeling of shared responsibility to expand amongst all partners. The last dimension that is changing with transdisciplinarity in our case is that we need to reconcile very different relationships with time. We're working about climate change, we're working with scientists, and this induces working in a long-term perspective. We need time to acquire data, we need time to analyze it, we need time to produce results and to disseminate them. But at the same time, we also have partners who really need those short-term milestones to happen. And this is something we're trying to do with this cycle of working groups, with regular publication of outputs and the organization of some regular events. Questions, as always. Working in the long term is a nice objective, but we are really depending on some external drivers such as political instability or financial instability of some of our partners. And we have to deal with that and their effective capacity for involvement in the program, which changes throughout time. And again, this need for short-term milestone really relates to caring for emotions of people and caring to the boredom or frustration and trying to identify it and handle it within our process. Time to conclude. So Alpages Sentinelles, in my opinion, can be really considered as this learning experience. We're not perfect, we're not really good at theory. I think here we don't have a theory of change yet. We should do so, I guess. What I get from it so far is that, in our case, climate change is a really mobilizing entry point. It brings people to the table and make them talk to each other, much in a really easier way compared to other topics such as wolf predation, to just name one. Second thing is that I told you about social ecological system. We don't have a perfect holistic view of the social ecological system, but we're trying to combine two dimensions, the productive dimension and the ecological dimension. So we're getting in this direction of being more systematic, let's say. And then, well, I mentioned it, we're this large network of themes, partners, and so on. We are facing quite a lot of challenges, but still it's ongoing, and we're trying to improve the situation. And yeah, as I mentioned, probably we need to do this theory of change, because so far for us it's really hard to really know where we are in this process and how things really changed over time from 2007 till now. I wanted to conclude by going beyond mountain pastures and beyond Alpages Sentinelles by mentioning that we're part of a larger network which is called Sentinelles des Alpes. It's all about mountain social ecological systems, and we're a meta network of 5 programs, let's say, who all have this objective of observing, understanding, and supporting climate, human, biodiversity trajectories in the Alps and over the long term. So we are all studying different objects, mountain lakes, mountain flora, mountain biodiversity, mountain huts, and mountain pastures. And so slowly we're trying to reach this more complete picture and to get a more holistic understanding. You can watch this video if you want to learn a bit more about it and if you speak French, basically. And I will end up with this last question, because all the questions I asked about Alpages Sentinelles actually also hold true when you reach this meta level. And one question for us, for instance, is how to maintain our identity, our dynamic within this broader network, which is super rich, enriching, but because it's all about sharing and exchanges, but it's also a challenge to be able to share and to be part of it. So with all those questions, I'm happy to get into a discussion with you on those dimensions.